glad to see you girls this morning. Some of you just heard the story, saw the cane, and thought that was her first mistake of the morning. I'm not happy to see you. I'm happy to experience the fullness of your presence in this morning. But I will say this, I see you with my heart. And can I just say, you're beautiful. I have just enjoyed being back there and listening and participating with you as we worshiped and as Charles led. Was that not just a piece of heaven? Now listen here, sister girls, you have had a full weekend. And you have experienced so much. I'm so grateful you got to hear from Lisa and from Allie and from Mandisa. And a lot of you were up partying late last night with our boy Taryn, right? So some of you might think you're tired this morning. Anybody feel a little tired? Well, I'm just going to tell you this. There is some energy and some empowerment that's about to come from God's word in the house of the Lord this morning. So who is ready? All right. Now, before I open the word, because we're going to talk about grace today and how we approach the throne of grace, but before I open the word, can I introduce you to my family? All right. If we had time, I would want to hear all about yours. But since we don't have time, we're just going to talk about mine for a few minutes. So here's what we're going to do. When the picture comes on the screen, you're going to say, "Aw," so I know it's there. Oh, all right. Now, when a blind woman tries to show you pictures, this is very high participation. It's like, where's Waldo, okay? So I'm going to give you a bunch of hints, and you're going to figure out who's who, okay? So there was a really handsome man who just walked me on stage. He is the oldest person in the picture. That's my husband, Phil. Now, my husband, Phil, well, yes, you can clap for him. My husband, Phil, happens to be a professor at Missouri State University. So that means I have my own Dr. Phil, all right? Now, Dr. Phil and I have two sons. So you will see in the picture, there is a son who looks like he may be the oldest son, and one clue of who he is he's probably standing or sitting next to a very attractive young woman. That is our oldest son, Clayton. Clayton is married to Caroline. They have now been married 10 years, but here's the thing, y'all. They dated in high school. Well, no, I'm sorry. The family thought they were dating. Clayton and Caroline were convinced they were not dating. But here's what they would do, you guys. Before school started, like they would go to Denny's and have Bible study and have breakfast together before school in the morning. I'm like, they were two little old people. Like they'd been married 50 years and they weren't even dating, okay? Finally, it took that boy so long to propose. We were like, son, if you do not ask the girl to marry you, like the family will, okay? So like, get with it. Well, they now have 3 little children. So you see, the oldest little boy is 5. He is Philip Clayton Rothschild III. Right? Such a big name. So they call him Trip, as in triple. The middle child is Lawson James. He's about to turn 3 this month, and he is all of 3. Anybody got 3-year-olds? Woo, yeah. And then we've got the little baby, John Robert, who just turned 1. Now we have our youngest son. Now our boys were born 10 years apart. So Clayton is 33 and Connor is 23. So that other young man you see right there is named Connor. He is still single for the ladies in the house. And he is such an amazing young man. He lives in Houston, Texas. So Connor was a high school debater. And Connor and I used to listen to NPR in the mornings before school started. We would have coffee, we'd have breakfast together, and we would listen to NPR. Now, for some of you are like, oh my gosh, she listens to NPR. Let me tell you why. I'm not making a political statement, left or right or anything. I will tell you why I listen to NPR in the morning. They're so calm. Like the world could be exploding around us, and they would announce it like this. And there's just something about it. It just helps me in the morning to have all that calmness. So anyway, Connor and I, because he was a high school debater and he was into policy, we listened to the news, and like he would explain to me what they were saying, and he would tell me what to think. And so like when he went to college, my IQ went down 20 points. But that's our Connor. So those are our people, and I'm so grateful you get to meet them. I also, my dear ones, carry this Bible on stage with me, and because I cannot see, I know that can be confusing why I would carry this Bible. But there's a reason. You met my middle grandchild, Lawson James. Lawson James is named after my daddy. My daddy went to heaven in 2018, and my heart broke into a million pieces because he was my hero. He was my pastor. And when he died, I did not know that my mother had chosen, at his request, to leave me his first preaching Bible. Y'all, the leather smells the same. The sound of the pages sounds the same. I remember holding this Bible as a little girl when church was over, and I would hold it for my daddy while he would shake hands as people left the church. So it's a treasure to me. He had written on a little piece of paper in his own shaky handwriting a quote that he had on his computer, which because he was sick for so long, that computer was pulled right up against his bed. And I asked my mother if I could have it also because it says, "Preach the word until the Lord calls you home." And so I carry this with me as a reminder that it is my privilege to teach the word until the Lord calls me home. So would you pray with me? Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you. Oh Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. This morning we're going to come to the throne of grace. You are invited to the throne of grace. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16. If you have a Bible with you and you want to look at it, or if you've got your digital device and you want to look it up, or you just want to jot it down and look at it later, it's our invitation. You are invited, Hebrews 4:16, to come boldly before the throne of grace to obtain grace and find mercy in your time of need. Some of you, this is your time of need. You are invited to come boldly or with confidence to the throne of grace. You know, God could have called his throne anything. The throne of justice, the throne of love, but he calls it the throne of grace. Why? Because God is a God who is longing to lavish upon you his unmerited favor. Everything you need, grace for the sinner, grace for the striver, grace for the struggler, you come to the throne of grace and you obtain grace and you find mercy in your time of need. So if we're going to come to the throne of grace this morning, how do we get there? How do we get to the throne of grace this morning? Well, I'll tell you how by telling you a story about that little boy you just met. He's my oldest grandson. His name is Trip. Trip can't say his awes very well. And it's adorable. Now, his mama, what a great mom she is. Caroline has been teaching him the books of the Bible. And so she's been working it and working it and working it. She's made up a melody. She's been singing it. He's been singing it. They've been learning it. And then all of a sudden, one afternoon, I get a voice memo on my text messaging. She writes, "You're not going to believe what I've done. Listen to this." And so I listen, and I wasn't exactly sure what she was talking about. So I know it's a little echoey in here, but I'm going to let you hear it twice. The first time you're going to hear it, I want to see if you notice. I didn't. And then I'll give you a hint and see if you notice the second time. So listen to what Caroline sent me.
Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel.
Okay, so little Trip started with the book of Isaiah. She just sent me this little clip. Isaiah, Jeremiah, you heard that? He's missing one book of the Bible, and it shows up, it's supposed to show up, after Jeremiah. Now listen to it again.
Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel.
Anybody know what Tripp forgot? Lamentation. Tripp forgot Lamentation, so he memorized the whole Old Testament, and then Caroline realized, oops, I forgot the book of Lamentation, and I said to her, that is the best mistake you've ever made. Because often we skip Lamentation too. Sometimes we hesitate to lament. We don't know what it means to lament. And so we skip it all together. Now, to lament means you express grief or sorrow or loss in prayer. That's what it means to lament. You express grief or sorrow or loss in prayer. And often we don't lament because we're like, oh, there's so many big problems in the world. Mine's not that big. I don't want to bother God with it. Or maybe, if you're like me, you struggle with this idea, well, man, I can't fix this, so I can't afford to feel it because I don't like the discomfort and uncertainty. So what do? We stuff it down in us. And what happens when we get stuck, my sisters, is when we stuff, we get stuck. And when we get stuck, we stumble if we even make it to the throne of grace. We don't come boldly before the throne of grace to obtain grace and find mercy in our time of need. And so this morning, I want us to come boldly to that throne of grace. And my invitation to you is that you approach that throne of grace on the path of lament. Now, sometimes we misunderstand what lament is, and we can get a little uncomfortable because we think, well, aren't I just complaining to God? So here's what lament is not. Lament is not grumbling. Okay, now, when I was a little girl, I used to go to Mama and Papa's on Saturday night. And on Saturday night in the 70s, Mama and Papa watched Lawrence Welk. And after Lawrence Welk, hee-haw. So I don't know if you remember this. Some of you who are too young to remember this, you didn't miss much, trust me. But Roy Clark, Buck Owens, they would be just looking miserable. And they'd start singing, gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep, dark depression, excessive misery, bum, bum, bum. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Remember that? All right, that is not lamenting. That is plain, straight up complaining. Gloom, despair, agony. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. That's grumbling, that's complaining. Lamenting is like taking those same emotions and situations, but you're groaning. Your soul is groaning before the Lord, saying, Lord, I feel despair. God, I just feel like another day. I don't know if I can face it. It's groaning before the Lord. Lament is a way to process your pain in the presence of the Lord. You process your pain in the presence of the Lord. You come boldly before the throne and you process your pain right there. So I'm going to give you 3 stepping stones as you approach that throne of grace, 3 stepping stones that'll help you get there in a healthy way. The first stepping stone is simply 2 words, I feel. Now this is based on Psalm 13. And so you also can turn to Psalm 13 because over the next few minutes, I'm going to go through the 6 verses that are in Psalm 13. But here's the thing, sister girls. I cannot see to read scripture. So when I listen to scripture, I listen on my iPhone with my Bible app, and I listen to different versions. And over the years, I've read different versions and I've memorized different versions. So when I quote scripture to you, it could be this very unique hybrid version of the New American International Jennifer version. So it's super important that you are able, if you can see, to see the word on your own. So we're going to look at Psalm 13 because God's word is truth, and he will speak to you through his spirit, through his word. Psalm 13. It has these 3 stepping stones on the path of the lament. The first is, I feel, and it's based on Psalm 13, verses 1 and 2. Psalm 13, verses 1 and 2. And here's what David is saying to God as he's approaching the throne of grace to obtain grace and find mercy and get help in his time of need. He says, how long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long, Lord? So if you listen to those words, you can hear him saying, God, this is how I feel. How long will you forget me forever? I feel forgotten. How long will you hide your face from me? I feel rejected. How long will I wrestle with these thoughts? I feel anxiety. How long, Lord, will I have sorrow in my heart day after day? I feel grief, I feel sorrow, I feel loss. I know there's some women in this room who feel extraordinary grief. I think of our sisters from Uvalde. Such excruciating grief. And when we approach the throne of grace, we say, God, I feel this way. Now, why do we do this? It is not necessarily for our catharsis. We tell God how we feel because it's an opportunity for the revelation of his character. It's not just about our catharsis. It's about revealing God's character. When we tell God how we feel, he reveals who he is. Several years ago, I was going through a very difficult spell. It lasted about 9 months of depression. And y'all, I had never experienced that before. Even though I've been blind since I was a teenager, I have had days of great sadness, anger, frustration, all of those emotions, but I never fell into a pit of depression until almost 10 years ago. And y'all, when I fell in, I fell so deep I could not claw my way out. I did everything I knew to do. And so many months into it, my husband, Phil, he had been trying to be supportive and trying to help and doing everything he could. And so this one particular night, as I just sat on the couch, he came to me with my tennis shoes and he said, let's go for a walk. We're gonna go walk on that path near Connors Elementary School. It's breezy, it's a cool evening, you'll love the sound of the creek, let's go. So I put on my shoes, which if you've ever been depressed, you know, just even putting your shoes and trying to go for a walk is like thinking you're gonna climb Mount Everest. So Phil and I get there and we begin to walk. And as we're walking, the breeze, it wafted. I could feel it caressing my cheeks. I could hear the rustle of the leaves. I could hear the babble of the creek near me. I mean, it was absolutely enchanting and it should have provoked wonder and peace and joy. But y'all, you know what it did for me? I just began to sob. And so Phil, who's been trying for months to help me, says, okay, what is it? What is it now? What is it? And a lot of times, I didn't know what it was. If you've ever been depressed, you don't know what it is. It's everything and nothing all at once. And it's hard to explain what it is. But this night, I knew exactly what it was because I had been feeling this and thinking about this for just months. I just was afraid to tell him, but I finally decided to tell him. And so I said to him, I'm afraid you're going to get tired of me and you're going to leave. I mean, blindness is a heavy enough burden that you've carried our whole marriage. And now I'm depressed and I'm afraid you're just going to get sick of me You're just going to be like, I can't take it anymore. I've tried everything. And she's just too much. She's too much to bear. Phil pauses and he looks at me and he said, when I said I do, it meant I won't ever leave you. Okay, he didn't say that. He meant it. That's what he meant to say. That's what he meant. Here's the thing, sisters. If Karen Kingsbury had been writing that scene, oh yeah, right? Can I just stop for the sisters and say, we married real men, not characters in novels? Give the man a break. He's doing his best, right? All right, he did not say, when I said I do, I meant I won't ever leave you. No, he didn't say that. I don't remember exactly what he said. But I remember how I felt, which was an indication of what he said. That basically that wasn't true. He's not the leaving type. It's not what he does. He sticks with me. He's a man who is steadfast and loyal and kind. But here's the thing, my sisters. Until I told him how I felt, I had conjured up an image of Phil in my mind and attached all sorts of fear to it because I had not been honest about my feelings. Therefore, I had created a false image of who he really was. That's why you tell God how you feel. Because when you tell him how you feel, it can reveal who he is. Oh Lord, how long will you forget me forever? What does God say to you in Isaiah 45? I will not forget you. Could a nursing mother forget her children? No, nor can I ever forget you. God, how long will you hide your face from me? And you hear God whisper to you through Psalm 34, I am close to the brokenhearted and those who are crushed in spirit. God, how long? Are you just going to get tired of me and get done bearing the burden of me? And you hear God whisper through the pages of Scripture, when I said I do, it meant I won't ever leave you or forsake you. Lament is a safe place for you to say, I feel, and it is a sacred place for God to show you who he is. So come boldly in lament to the throne of grace and tell God how you feel so you can obtain grace and find mercy and help in your time of need. Stepping stone 2. I need. Psalm 13, verses 3 and 4. David goes on to say, how long will my enemies triumph over me? Lord, look on me and answer. Enlighten my eyes, or I'm going to sleep the sleep of death, and my enemies are going to party at my funeral. That's not exactly what it says. But you get the idea. My enemies are going to be so glad they overcame me. The psalmist is now saying as he's approaching the throne of grace, God, this is what I need. So I want you to consider the needs that David mentions in Psalm 13, verses 3 and 4. He says, I need you to look on me and answer. I need you to enlighten my eyes. Now, in Hebrew writing, look on me and answer, or turn to me and hear, whatever your version says, that's called Hebrew repetition. So he's really saying one thing in two ways. Kind of like if I would have said to you, I'm pregnant, I'm gonna have a baby, right? By the way, when I was pregnant, I said, I am Jennifer Roth with child. But it's Hebrew repetition. But for our sake, I want you to think of it this way. I think it represents some needs for us. God, see me, look upon me, and answer. I remember when our little boy, Connor, was just 2 years old, We had a friend over at the house, and we were in our basement, which meant we had to pass through the bottom hallway to get upstairs, and on that bottom hallway was a picture gallery. And as we're walking up, Joey starts to ask me questions about the pictures, which, as we've already experienced together as a group, I have no idea what is in a picture. And so she's trying to describe things, and I'm trying to tell her who's who. Well, the whole time that we're doing this, Connor is like, me, on Miss Joey's leg. And we keep talking, and me. Finally, Joey pauses. She gets down right on his level, looks right in his eyes, and she said, Connor, I see you. And that little boy, boom, sped upstairs, totally content. Why? Because he knew he had been seen. That's your greatest need, is to know that God sees you. He sees you in your sorrow. He sees you in your failure. He sees you when you're crying silent tears. He sees you when you shame yourself because you're not better yet. He sees you. He knows you. He looks upon you. It is your greatest need. And he has met that need through Christ. He sees you. Yet David also says, answer me. Answer me. Which I think the beauty of that Hebrew repetition is to recognize that if God sees you, he hears you and answers you. It's a package deal. But we still long to hear an answer. In the Old Testament book of Habakkuk, by the way, I have a major crush on the minor prophets. In the book of Habakkuk, if you read the first chapter, and by the way, there's only 3, if you read the first chapter, you see Habakkuk starts off talking a lot like David. How long, Lord, are you going to ignore me forever? How long am I going to call on you and you're not going to hear? How long am I going to have to look at evil? That's how he opens it up. But then on the 3rd chapter, he has this beautiful hymn of praise that begins in Habakkuk 3:17, where he says, though the olive crop fails and there's no fruit on the vine, though there's no sheep in the stall, and I'm still going to praise you. I'm going to rejoice in the God of my salvation, because you've made my feet like hinds' feet, capable of climbing the high places. Wow. If you read chapter 3, you think, well, clearly chapter 2 must be full of answers. Because Habakkuk sounds so satisfied. He starts off with all this angst, but then he ends up with all this feeling pleased and satisfied. Well, clearly God met his needs and answered. No, that's not what happened. Habakkuk's response was based on God himself, not on what God did or did not do for Habakkuk. Sometimes we don't recognize our truest needs. Our greatest need is not the answer we want from God. Our greatest need is to find God as our answer. Because really, when it comes down to it, girls, the answers don't satisfy. Only God does. Sometimes we have to rest in the mystery of God to experience the freedom we long for, even in our pain. When Clayton was just a little boy, he was about 6 years old. He was old enough to understand that I couldn't see. And he would pray that God would heal me. And I remember being so struck by this because it wasn't something I talked about a lot. And there's a reason. It wasn't because I didn't think God could heal me. Oh my goodness, I know he can heal me. But it's because I recognized a deeper need. In many ways, it's the need that David acknowledges there. Enlighten my eyes, Lord. You see, I realized I was a discontent woman. And I began to really pray for contentment. God, give me contentment even within blindness. Because here's the thing, if he healed me of my blindness and I had never experienced and learned contentment, then I would be the grumpiest, most bitter-sighted woman you'd ever met. We need to pray for the deeper gifts. Enlighten my eyes. In Hebrew thinking, enlightenment was the entrance of wisdom, truth, and goodness. God, I need wisdom. I need to be able to see your goodness. I need to know the truth. That's my greatest need. So you come to God boldly, to his throne of grace, and you tell him what you need so that you can obtain that grace. You can find mercy and the help that you need when you need it most. Sometimes if you have not asked God to enlighten your eyes, if you have not received the enlightenment of your spiritual eyes, you will not be able to perceive when God is actually meeting the needs you've longed for. In the New Living Translation, Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 says, tell God what you need and thank him for what he has done. Third stepping stone on that path of lament as you're making your way to the throne of grace is this. I will. So you've told God how you feel, you've expressed what you need, and now you're making a declaration, I will. See, David said, I will trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing unto the Lord, for he has been good to me. It's like all of the tumult leading up to this point suddenly shifts into triumphant praise. How does that happen? It happens when we let our will be completely informed and influenced and shaped by God's will. It is God's will that we give thanks. It is God's will that we trust in him. And it's not just because he deserves that, it's because your soul needs that. You know, if you look back in verse 2 of Psalm 13, when David said, how long am I going to wrestle? How long am I going to wrestle with my thoughts and have sorrow in my heart day after day? The King James Version of that verse says, how long, Lord, am I going to take counsel in my own soul? Whew. Here's the thing, y'all. We don't need to take counsel in our souls. We need to take our souls to counseling. And here's your counselor. We do. Otherwise, we live in an echo chamber. And there are times when we just need to say, regardless of how I feel, in spite of what I need, I will. I will trust in your unfailing love. That's why I'm coming to your throne of grace. My heart will rejoice in your salvation, not in my circumstances, not in my past, not in my issues. My heart will rejoice in your salvation, and therefore I will sing unto the Lord. For he's been good to me. You noticed when we met my family that our boys were born 10 years apart. 10 years was not our family planning. It was like having two firstborns. And I'm just saying, girls, there was a season of our life where I am not even kidding you. Connor was a preschooler, Clayton was a preteen, and I was premenopausal. There was not joy in the house of the Lord. I'm just saying. It was hard. But it had turned out that we had our children 10 years apart because of some issues with getting pregnant and miscarrying. And so I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday morning in September. And my world came crashing down because just 3 months earlier, I had finally become pregnant after trying for 6.5 years, finally conceding that, maybe Clayton's gonna be an only child and Lord, just help us not to ruin him. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden Aunt Flo didn't come to town and it's like, yes. And I was so excited. I was nauseous. I was grateful for the nauseousness. I mean, Clayton had even planned that he would have a little roommate who would sleep at the porta-crib at the bottom of his bunk bed. I mean, we were just so giddy with excitement. And then that Tuesday morning in September came, when I woke up and I realized, man, I feel so much better. And then I realized I was spotting. So I immediately called the doctor. The nurse said, just lay down, put your legs up, lay down. We'll call you back as soon as we can. So I remember laying on the couch and I was holding the phone against my chest and I was praying, God, no, please, please, we're finally pregnant, please. We had some false starts, please. This one was longer than any other, please don't let me lose this baby, please. And the phone rang and I picked it up knowing it would be the doctor's office, and it was my friend Gina. Gina was a pastor's wife in our town. She had taken me under her wing, and she was like a mother to me. She has since gone to heaven. But when I heard her voice, I began to just cry. And she said, you be quiet right now. I'm going to pray for you. And she began to pray. She prayed something no one had ever prayed for me before. She said, Lord, I'm just asking you to sing a new song over her. Just sing a new song over her. We hung up. Doctor called, Phil and I went in. They determined the baby did not have a heartbeat. The doctor explained what the process of miscarriage would be like and how it could last a couple of days, and he gave me certain signs to know if things went a certain direction, I needed to go back in for a surgical procedure. So we went home with nothing but loss and barrenness and emptiness and grief, and I had to just wait for the process to finish. Well, as the doctor had signaled, I did have some things go wrong that meant we had to go back in for a surgical procedure. Over those days, sitting on the couch and waiting and wishing and wondering, I had started to hear a melody. And I couldn't really figure it out. But it kept getting louder. It took shape. Lyrics started to join the melody. And as Phil and I drove to the hospital that Saturday, we met the doctor in a room, and there was a nurse there as they prepped me, and you know how they have to put your stirrups and getting ready for the whole awful procedure to finish the miscarrying process. It was quiet in the room, and I began to sing. While the doctor was doing the procedure, I began to sing. Now, you need to know something about me. I'm not a singer, okay? Early in ministry, I used to sing a lot, but I said I sang a lot. I didn't say I was a singer. Charles Billingsley is a singer. You know what I'm saying? I sing a little, but definitely not in front of people unless it's like a big audience where no one can talk back to me. But in front of one or two, like I don't even sing in the shower. It's just not what I do. So that day as I laid there, tears were streaming down my cheeks. I began to sing the melody that I had been hearing. Of your mercy, I will sing. Of your mercy, I will sing. With my mouth will I make known your faithfulness to me. I will sing of your mercy. I kept singing it over and over. I could hear Phil, the doctor, and the nurse begin to try to hold back tears. At one point, Phil told me the nurse literally reached over with a tissue and dabbed the doctor's tears. My sisters, I know that sometimes it's a hard road you have to travel to get to the throne of grace. But you are pulled there through the kindness of Christ. God paved a way for you to walk that path of lament, to get to that throne of grace through the life and death and resurrection of his son, Jesus. Because there is a place for you at the throne of grace. Some of you are desperate to obtain grace this morning. Some of you are desperate to find mercy and help because your need is greater than your hope even right now. You're invited to come boldly to that throne. So I'm just going to say to you, sisters, when your heart is breaking, you come to the throne of grace. When your soul is bruised and aching, you come to the throne of grace. When you feel forsaken, come to the throne of grace. When your core is shaken, come to the throne of grace. And when you are finally done faking, you come to the throne of grace. Because God's arms are wide open, ready to receive you and give you what you need and find that help. And it's all because of the grace of Jesus.